not your estimated, not your adjusted, not your just sort of, oh yeah, I have this many doors and my bank account looks like this. Do you actually know what your numbers are? What are your goals? Because that's another question where I get a lot of answers. I don't know. I started this. I fell into this. I inherited this. I bought this. The bottom 10% of your portfolio is most likely taking up 20 to 30% of your time, and you're probably losing money on them. If someone answers the question, what are your goals? I almost always get a door count number. And it's usually somewhere between 3x and 5x what they currently have, no matter how long they've been in business.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Property Management Show. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Whitaker. Matthew, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, I had to clear my calendar. I listened to a couple episodes without me, so I had to clear my whole afternoon to make sure I jump back in here and save this thing.
You did because you were like, I'm getting left behind.
Exactly. Exactly.
Spencer's too good without me. I need to come on back and bring him back down to earth.
That's right. You were running away with the show the last couple weeks.
All right, enough of the jokes. All right, so we have a guest with us, Brad Johnson, the CEO of ProfitCoach. Now, Brad, thanks for being on the show. You know, Matthew and I had a couple of clips out there about property management, selling your business. We recorded a podcast about selling your property management company. You commented on one of those LinkedIn posts. You're like, hey, I'd love to talk about this because I'm looking at property management companies all the time and what they need to do to sell. And then you and I had a conversation at NARPM Southern States here in Birmingham. And so we decided to do this podcast. So welcome to the show, man. We're really excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, getting your financial house in order, preparing to sell, getting some expectations on what that looks like. That's something that I talk to clients, prospects, PMs all the time about. So fun to get to do that with you guys who sit on typically a different side of the table, looking to acquire, analyzing businesses. So thinking that we'll probably have a pretty good time chopping that up.
Yeah, and we were talking actually as we were here in Birmingham chatting. You mentioned something that I want to get into today. We're not going to do it right now, but I do want to talk about it. You're like, I have clients that say, hey, I want to grow to 5,000 doors or 3,000 doors and then sell. And you're like, well, do you really? Like sometimes it's better to stay smaller. So we're going to get into that. But listen, thanks for being on the show. And why don't we kick off? I'd love for the audience to hear just like how you got how you got into property management, because you were in property management before you came CEO, and just kind of tell us your origin story here.
Actually, and that's the question I was gonna ask.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I was gonna ask, like, this is somebody that's actually made it out of property management, and so this is just a completely personal thing. How do I get out?
Are you hiring, Brad?
Yeah,
That's what he wants to know. Are you hiring?
Where can I get a gig? Where can I get a job?
There we go. Yes. Hiring very selectively. So
we don't qualify.
Never mind.
I can send you a link to apply, but we'll have to see how it goes. So yeah, it's a good question. Just like most people in property management, it's not a career choice that I made when I was 10 and the firefighter came in and asked what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I said, I want to be a property manager. It didn't go quite like that. I have a bit of a unique story in how I roundabouted my way here. So I went to NC State for business school. So my initial track was business. About halfway through that, I felt a calling and really had a conviction that I needed to go into pastoral ministry. So I finished my undergrad. I went to Southeastern Seminary to get my MDiv, joined a church plant, joined a church staff, did that for a few years, which was a great opportunity and really great experience for me. But through a confluence of a few events, a full-time, like kind of permanent job at that church didn't work out. And so I figured that down the line, I'd probably church plant. So I already kind of had the entrepreneurial ministerial bent. And so I figured, okay, until I get to that point, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm 23, 24, just not really done enough life to feel comfortable doing that. I just figured I'd go get a job. So I got the first job I could get, which was an HOA manager. which there's a reason why they'll take anybody.
Yeah, while that was open, yeah. As somebody that just sold our second HOA business, we get out of those as fast as we can possibly can.
Yeah, it's a tough life. The profit model there is pretty difficult, not impossible, but it's difficult. And usually the hardest part of owning or running a HOA business is staff turnover is so high because it's brutal work. So I did that for 2 years. I got good exposure to the worst parts of the world in that position. But I did realize that I really liked real estate, and I liked dealing with certain aspects of real estate. So I parlayed that opportunity into a licensed commercial property manager position. So I went and got my license. I became a commercial PM, managed industrial, retail, office, kind of everything. Did that for 2 years, and then got a crazy story. Don't have time for it today, but got an email out of the blue from the largest PM company in Wilmington, North Carolina, where I live, that said, "Hey, we're looking for a general manager. Do you want to apply?" And I was like, "Why would you want me to apply? I've never managed a person in my life, but since you asked, I'll apply."
Sure. Yes,
I applied. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd love to run a fairly large small business after having just managed real estate for a few years and being 29 years old. I got the job. And so that was great. And it just ended up in the most perfect scenario for me personally, with an owner, Dave Sawyer, who had both the experience to coach me and teach me, but the humility to allow me to run the company, allow me to make my own mistakes, set my own vision, and kind of forge my own path and run this 1,300 unit, 20 employee business that was a bit of a cornerstone of our community, a pretty big market share in a town like Wilmington. And I got to do that for 3 years. It was really, really fun. Fast forward to the end of that, he sold the business. And I was aware of that. I helped with the due diligence process. I was kind of involved from start to finish. I was kept on after we were acquired, but figured out through that whole process, and had kind of known for a while. I mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit that I've kind of always had, that I really wanted to own my own business, and I really wanted to at least be in a partnership where I had my name to something, and I was building something that I owned. So ran into Daniel Craig, pretty well known in our industry, at the Lead Simple University conference in December 2023. Had a conversation with him. He was like, I'm actually looking to step out of my role as CEO of ProfitCoach. Would you be interested? And I was like, sure. Well, just like the last one. Well, I feel a little unqualified, but let's have a conversation. And very shortly thereafter, I became a partner in that business, took over the CEO seat, and for 18 months, I've been running ProfitCoach, and it's also a wonderful fit for me, and I'm having a great time.
That's fantastic. I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, I need to start going to some of these conferences where I can just hand off the CEO job. I've been waiting on Spencer to take it for years, and he.
I've seen what you do. I don't want to do it. Well, that's great. Brad, I was sitting here. One of the things that you had responded to on LinkedIn was Matthew and I were talking about, what does a company need to do to get ready to sell? And I said, Matthew, what would you best advice you would give? And he said, get your financial house in order. I'd like to know from you, Brad, what would you say if you had a client that came to you and said, hey, I want to sell in the next 3 to 5 years? What's the advice you're giving your clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar, frankly. It's do you have clarity on your actual financial performance, not your estimated, not your adjusted, not your just sort of, oh yeah, I have this many doors and my bank account looks like this. Do you actually know what your numbers are? First of all, are you even doing your accounting correctly? And we won't go into the details today about accounting because that's very boring. And that's why people pay us to do them, so that they don't have to do them themselves. But are you using your PM software to do your accounting? Is your business entity set up as a property in your PM software to do your corporate accounting? We see that all the time. instead of people using a proper corporate accounting, I'll just say like most PMs should just be using QuickBooks Online to keep their books and not doing them anywhere near their trust accounting or their client's bank account information. Because again, commingling, big issue, not the topic of today, but way more common than people think. So are you doing your accounting properly? And then on the backside of that, do you actually know your numbers? Do you know your revenue numbers? And do you know where they've been and where they're going? Do you have control of your expenses? And do you have a good understanding of what moves the needle on expense? Certainly, biggest component of expense, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit at some point, is labor. Do you understand how your labor is moving, what your labor costs are? Is your labor segregated the way that it's supposed to be, the right people doing the right things at the right price? And then, of course, do you understand your actual profitability? Have you baked in a proper salary for yourself if you're not taking a market salary? Are you breaking out your revenue appropriately? Do you know where your ancillary revenue comes from, where your management fee revenue comes from, what the ratio of those two things are and what they should be? So getting your financial house in order is a really great first step, because without that, how would you assess the viability of any sort of well, as an acquirer, how would you even really know what to offer? And then as a seller, how would you even know what is good? What's a good offer to accept? So I would say that's the first step.
Brad, you mentioned something that I often think about with these smaller businesses that we're looking at. We look at businesses and think more along the lines of revenue, because you mentioned EBITDA. And what we've seen is a lot of PMs basically don't account for their salary and just say, oh, my business is doing, X $100,000 of EBITDA. And the truth is, if they got hit by a bus and they had to go replace themselves with somebody that does all the stuff they're doing, they can't do that for the $40,000 that they're paying themselves, right? I mean, this is somebody that has got to be very competent, got to run this business. And so we just quit trying to have those conversations and just started talking on from a revenue multiple. And I've heard other people in the industry say, oh, well, we buy an EBITDA multiple. Well, I've never figured out how to do that, because I've never figured out how to consistently tell a small business what their true EBITDA is. So pretty interesting. I'd love for you to dig into that comment a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to. That's actually one of the core purposes of the NARPM Standard Chart of Accounts and the NARPM Accounting Standards, which is a standardized approach to corporate accounting. So everyone's using the same general ledger accounts. They're using the same numbers, the revenue, the expenses. They're broken out with the same degree of granularity. And then, so first of all, the best way to segment that out on the expense side and to really get an understanding of that is management labor versus direct labor. And those are two different ratios. Are you guys familiar with simple numbers? Have you read Greg Crabtree?
I have. Yep.
Yeah. So that sort of concept of labor efficiency from both a direct and a management perspective. And then one of the things we did in the accounting standards and the financial performance guide is a survey number is not perfectly reliable, but it often tends to be very close to the mark and is very, very useful. So we asked everyone across the data set, what would it cost to replace yourself? If you did get hit by a bus, what would it cost in your market with your revenue and the responsibilities that you have to replace yourself to run your business? We aggregated all that data, and then we made a owner compensation standardization sheet. So and it is based on revenue. So same track of thinking there, which is based on your revenue, this is what it would cost to replace yourself. So when we do an analysis of our companies, of our clients' financial performance, we take from that chart what their standardized compensation should be or would be, and we adjust it up or down. It's almost always up to account for that and to get more of a true profit margin and more of a true dollar amount for profitability, so that they can have an idea if they do, because you're right, some acquirers do value based on EBITDA. And the business that I was in that we sold, that was an EBITDA based valuation. And so they did do that sort of owner compensation. Now, the owner compensation in that business was effectively zero, because I was taking the place of the owner compensation with my salary.
Right. Yeah. And do you think, I'd be interested if if the people that are using this, are they capturing the idea of what you're trying to say in that, like, because one of the things I've consistently come back to is they just struggle with understanding true EBITDA. So I guess that would be the whole point of hiring somebody like you, is so that you actually understand the real numbers.
Yeah. And I mean, not to toot our own horn, but that's definitely a big part of what we do is, do you know the real numbers? And I think I would guess that some of the folks who are valuing based on EBITDA, they have some sort of standardized system in which they run all that through to make sure that it's standardized. But I think your point is a really good one. Revenue is a pretty good shortcut to the true value of a business. And particularly, I would think on your side of things, because you get to see what the revenue is, what the revenue potential could be post-acquisition, and then how it might fit into your scaled up profitability model to be able to produce the sort of return that you're looking for as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So what are some of the, when clients come to you, what are some of the things that they're coming to you? Like, what kind of financial blind spots do you see? And then another, like a follow-up question would be, are people typically coming to you because they want to get ready for a sale, or is it just like, hey, we just want you to get everything straight and help us long term, or is it mainly a sell?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll kind of answer them both together. Or really it's the second question first. Why are they coming to us? Mm-hmm. They're usually coming to us because they heard us talk, they were on a webinar, or they had a conversation with somebody and it made them realize, I don't actually know what's going on in my business from a financial perspective. I look at a P&L. If I look at a P&L, it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't understand where I'm going. I don't really understand where I am. I mean, on probably half of my discovery calls, I say, all right, at some point I ask the big question, which is, how much money does your business make each year? Or what was your profitability in the last 12 months? About half the time I get the answer, I don't know. And that's crazy to me. I mean, in one sense, I really understand it, because entrepreneurs, especially property management entrepreneurs, sometimes they were property investors, they were real estate investors. A lot of times they were realtors. Neither of those groups of people usually have a big background in like company financial analysis. Maybe they've run a pro forma on a property, or they had a great realtor who ran a pro forma on a property, but they haven't actually managed a business before. So they have the entrepreneurial spirit. They're usually pretty good at sales and marketing. They're often not good on financial analysis, and they've gotten to some measure of success without having that clarity, but they realize that they can't get to the next level of success until they understand what's driving the engine. So that's kind of part of it. The other part is and you mentioned this even in the intro, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but they got into the business thinking, okay, grow the doors, grow the doors, grow the doors, grow the doors. And they've been growing the doors, and they have 400, 500. I recently have a client, 700 doors, and they're not making any money. And they don't understand why they're not making any money, because they have so many doors. There's so much activity happening and such little money actually flowing to the bank account. So they don't have clarity, and they don't really know where to start. And then, what are we doing with them? We're getting really clear on what are your goals, because that's another question where I get a lot of answers. I don't know. I started this. I fell into this, I inherited this, I bought this, and I'm just trying to grow it. Well, first of all, what does growth mean? But second of all, what do you want from this? What is the end game? So to answer one of your questions as well, they're not usually coming to us, except for our most recent webinar, which was very much on this topic, and an upcoming one. They're not usually coming saying, I want to sell, can you help me understand how to value my business? They're usually saying, I don't know how much money I'm making. I don't really know what I want. Can you help me figure both of those things out and help me get from here to there? And that's really the role that we play.
I think, like Matthew, if you went back 10, 12 years ago, you probably wouldn't be too much dissimilar to some of the people that are coming to him, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Financial accounting was not your big suit. You kind of fell into the business. You grew it because you weren't really good at sales and marketing, but if somehow you grew it anyway. I'm kidding. But yet you knew that, hey, I don't really have a grasp on all my financial numbers.
It was interesting. When and this is more like on the property level, but when I learned that the net profit on a property included the principal pay down, I couldn't wrap my brain around the fact that I was having to give the bank my principal and I was getting counted against me in terms of net profit. Now, it obviously, for those that are listening, generally depreciation helps on the other side of it. But for learning accounting was one of the hardest things. I was a C+ accounting student. And if I hadn't married my accounting tutor, I probably would have been way worse than that. So totally agree. Interesting you said that, Brad, because I just had a conversation and these guys listened to the podcast and they just wanted to ask me some questions. And one of the things they couldn't figure out is they're not paying themselves any money. Their property management company's at $1,200, or maybe they're paying themselves a very small salary, and they just can't figure out, like, why are we not making money? And so one question I would ask you, Brad, is, like, what type of process do you take them through? I would imagine there's, like, before you start dialing it in very tight, there's kind of the big rocks that you can go through where there's some big mistakes that are being made. So what's the process that you would take them through if they called you on the phone?
Yeah, that sounds good. And by the way, if they're listening, they're welcome to call me on the
phone. They're great dudes. I was like, you guys got to figure out how you can make a lot more money than what you're paying yourself, because they've been doing this a decade. And similar story. They were real estate investors, still are real estate investors, and look, they're able to pay themselves some money out of their real estate business. But
so it's not so painful right now.
Well, but I'm like, geez, y'all ought to be making tons of money out of the property management business at $1,200.
Yeah, definitely. So usually the lowest hanging fruit is on the revenue side. There's a pretty good chance that their revenue model is insufficient, and it's insufficient in its pricing strategy, the limited amount of channels they have for revenue generation, or sometimes it's actually they have the fee schedule and they don't enforce it. They don't actually charge the fees that they say that they would, because there's too much optionality for the property manager to go one way or the other. People generally want to make other people happy, so they don't charge fees when they don't have to. So yeah, there's a few things there. The first one is ancillary revenue generation. So it's, most service-based businesses that have a management fee or a base fee model generally, and you guys know this probably even better than I do, but generally you pay your bills on your management fee and you bank your profit to some degree on your ancillary revenue and your ability to provide value above and beyond what your folks are paying you for just for your management fee. And then you have the ability to monetize that value and actually, capture the value that you're creating. So my question to them would be, all right, let's sit down and look at this. What is your management fee? Is it at market rate? If it's under market rate, is there a reason why it's under market rate? Is there a strategic, intentional reason for that? Sometimes there is. And then on the ancillary side, let's look at, before we even give you the list or look at a list of here's all the things you could do, let's walk through your operations. Let's walk through your processes and identify areas where you are genuinely creating value for your owners and tenants, and have a mature conversation about how to monetize that value. That's kind of the opposite of and people can use this phrase and mean something a little bit differently than what I'm saying, but it's kind of the opposite of the concept, at least, of fee maxing. So fee maxing, like as a concept, is I want to get everything I could possibly get, and every time there's an opportunity to charge a fee, I want to charge a fee. If you can correlate all of that to commensurate value creation, I don't really have a problem with that, but I really do think that gets the process backwards. And they should start with all right, where are we creating value? Well, you're creating a tremendous of value when you lease up a property. Do you have a lease up fee? What is your lease up fee? Would people be willing to pay this lease up fee? You create a tremendous amount of value for the owner at renewal. I would argue just as much as lease up. You've successfully managed a tenant for a year. They don't hate you as a property management company. They might even like you. And they like the house, which means you took good care of the house. You generate a lot of value. You should monetize that value. On the tenant side, same sort of thing. There's value generated in the application process. There's value generated in the onboarding process. There's value generated in the maintenance process, a lot of value generated. So I would start by a walkthrough of revenue creation and revenue generation, and is it there? And then that's usually where a lot of low-hanging fruit is. And then another place, kind of the first place to start on the bottom side of the ledger is on labor. Are you utilizing global talent? Are you, how is the work in your company being done? Are the $50 an hour people sitting there doing $10 an hour admin tasks? Or are they spending their time only doing work that's worthy of the sort of price that you're paying for them? And should you be allocating more of their administrative work to more of an administrative pay scale? So just by doing those two things, you can really do a whole lot there.
Brad, first thing is I am shocked that you said revenue. That's not where I thought you would go first. But what was interesting is as I walked through some of the how they were thinking about their business, I realized, or what I thought, and they still did not think it, but I challenged based on owning a maintenance company because they did a lot of maintenance in-house. I challenged them on, hey, are y'all charging enough for this? Because it was my experience that when I charged that much, I wasn't making any money. So I'm not saying that you're not, but it feels to me, my mental model tells me something's off there.
And I remember having those conversations, and Matthew would always say, like, hey, we're going to, just over the past 10 years, we're going to have to raise maintenance prices. And what you always said was, listen, the owner's going to complain whether you're charging $50 an hour or $75 an hour. So you might as well charge $75.
You might as well make money while you're doing it. You might as well do it. And they're going to pay more. What we've realized, Brad, is even though we've raised rates, we're still cheaper than the market. And we're not cheaper than their brother-in-law, but we're still cheaper than the market. And I think some people listen so much to some of the complaining of the bottom 10% of their owners that they, to your point, they just don't charge enough because it's way easier not to deal with the complaining. And you feel like, oh, this is a value add. I'm basically doing maintenance and making a little bit of money. But as long as your maintenance guy doesn't have to go back, he's not sick, he doesn't take time off, you make money, but the truth is, and you don't give them any holidays, but the truth is you're not making any money. The second thing, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I mean, if you're not charging 3 to 4x what you're paying your technician on an hourly rate, and they're not hitting an 80 to 90% utilization rate, you're not making any money.
Yeah, nailed it. That's exactly what I told them. I said, what are you paying your techs? I said, you need to be at least 3x what your techs are. It's been our experience. So that's great feedback. The other thing, and kudos to y'all, because ProfitCoach is how informed our thinking on this. We talk a lot about direct labor efficiency ratio internally. I heard it from you first, and I know that that's a concept from the Simple Profits Coach, or the book you mentioned.
Simple Numbers, yeah.
Simple Numbers, yes. And that's just informed our thinking. And when we think about labor, we don't necessarily think about it in terms of number of people on an issue or number of people handling it. We think of it in terms of dollars. And to your point, we've utilized a lot of international talent. About half of Evernest's international talent, or half of Evernest's talent is international talent. And so we've been very successful in finding great team members all over the world to help us manage these properties and to help with profitability.
Yeah. DLAR, I mean, the very quick and dirty shortcut to DLAR it's direct labor efficiency ratio. How many dollars of revenue do you generate for every dollar you spend on direct labor? You have to be at least a 2. You want to be at a 3, and you're in a very good place if you're at a 4. Which is not that different than what I just explained. That it's a simpler version of the same concept I just talked about with the labor. with labor for your technicians, right? If you're 3 to 4x, if you're charging 3 to 4x what you're paying them, and they're being utilized at 80 to 90%, you're coming in at somewhere between 2.5 or 3 after you apply that 80%. So it's the same sort of thing. The reason why that metric is so important is it hits both sides of the equation. It's on the revenue side. Are those activities actually generating enough revenue? Do you have the right pricing strategy? Do you have enough channels to monetize revenue? And then on the labor side, is the work they're doing correlated well to what you're actually paying them? So yeah, it's a big deal. And it's if you're gonna track one thing that gives you the most information about the financial performance of your business, that would be it.
One of the things I'll often tell internally to our team about ancillary services, I like to tell them the story of Jeff Bezos and when he started Amazon. And, you know, those of us that are 40 plus remember what Amazon used to be. It was a bookseller and you would order books, and I was probably $100 a year customer of Jeff. I've always loved to read, and I would order my books at Amazon.com. They were cheaper on Amazon, and it was just like a great service. But what he realized is, or what he recognized really early was, as I build trust with delivering books, then I can expand on that. And I know that these same customers of mine are going to want other things, right? And so he expanded to CDs, he expanded to toys, he expanded to furniture, he expanded now to everything, including groceries, right? Like I get my groceries. So Jeff,
you can actually buy a tiny house on Amazon now.
Yeah, you can buy a car.
Yeah,
you can buy a car. You can buy a house. Yeah,
did not know that. And at one point, he was trying to do some services. I don't think that worked, but you could even get your house cleaned. Oh. But my point to everybody is, like, I willingly went from $100 a year customer to
$100,000.
Well, I would say let's call it north of 10,000. So, that's what 100x in terms of like wallet share he took because he built trust. And I think when people think about ancillary products, they think, oh, I'm selling them things they don't need. Well, the truth is, I don't buy stuff from Amazon that I don't need. I buy stuff from Amazon because I trust that they're going to deliver it. They're going to deliver it in 2 days or 1 day or whatever. And I want to buy more stuff from Amazon. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't even look anywhere else because I trust Amazon so much. And what I think, with the way property managers need to look at this is, people are buying things already. You mentioned maintenance. I think there's no doubt that somewhere right now in the Evernest portfolio, a toilet is breaking, an air conditioner is breaking, and we can certainly subcontract that out, and we do that in some areas, but a lot of places we employ a technician that's going to go fix that at least at market rate and mostly less than market rate. And all we're doing is capturing more of the wallet share of the things we're generating. Like, the owner does not care. The owner, in fact, wants us to do these types of things. And when you think about things like insurance and internet and just like all these different things that the ecosystem of a property manager does, they want to buy more things. Like, there's no reason that
it's easier to do that.
Yeah, because we used to talk about always putting together our Rolodex of people to be an investor, and you had to have all these different people. Well, if somebody could just go to one spot and buy a rental house and have the whole ecosystem with one easy button, that's what they want from a property manager. That's what a resident wants.
Right. That's right.
And how can you use the benefit of the scale of, whether you have 300 homes or 3,000 homes or 3 million homes, you have scale. And how can you use that scale to benefit all the people that you touch in your ecosystem?
Yeah, totally. And if you want some evidence on why, so that, I think that's actually the example I was going to give is helpful, but the one that you gave is much more compelling because it's kind of the carrot side of, this is why you should do this. This is better for your customers. On the other side, just from the practicality standpoint, we've kind of seen some good examples of this, of attempting to run a business like this without those sort of services. The most recent one is Southwest Airlines. So Southwest Airlines did like low fares, no ancillary fees. Everybody loved Southwest Airlines. They got a ton of scale, but they weren't making money. And their investors at the end of the day said, hey, we need to see some return on this. And so what did Southwest do? Well, they started charging ancillary services because the model without it just doesn't really work. And because they had built a really good brand, so they had already built a lot of trust, they made the argument for why they needed to charge those ancillary services. And to my knowledge, they're not facing some huge backlash. Well, I'm sure they face backlash, but they're not facing a mass exodus because they started charging people for bags. They basically made the case and they were like, look, we're barely getting by. We need to be able to charge for bags because think about all the work that goes into carting a bag from plane to plane. So the model just simply doesn't really work without those things. But again, I would say your example is better. It's a lot closer to the way that I look at it, which is start with value creation. Where are you creating value for your owner? Where are you building trust with your owner? You have the right to monetize that. And one common theme that I see from folks when we talk about this is they're like, oh, I'm going to if I start charging fees, if I start charging for my services for maintenance, all my owners are going to leave. It does not happen. That just does not happen. Yeah. If you make it crazy or you roll it out really stupidly, maybe you will have some churn. But in general, when you introduce ancillary revenue and ancillary costs for the things that you're doing, and you do it in a tactful way, and you explain why, those people already love you. They've already proven to you that they want to buy from you and that they want to work with you. They're not going to leave. You might get some complaining, and you're right, usually from the bottom 10% that you should probably fire anyways. But most of the time they just say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we all continue to have a relationship.
Brad, do you ever get your customers or clients to go through and look at the bottom 10% and say, let's just see if even the bottom 10% are profitable. If they're not, let's fire all of them, and that'll actually lift your profit?
Yeah, totally. We have a tool we use to analyze that, where we can look unit by unit and look at unit. If you allocate expenses linearly, you can look unit by unit and try to get an understanding of your profitability by unit. And then kind of that's the objective way of looking at this. Where am I making money across my portfolio? Where am I not? On the subjective side, there's also all right, let's rank. We did this at Sawyer every single year. We ranked every single property, every single owner from top to bottom, and we fired the bottom 10 owners. Not 10%. We weren't quite at the spot where we could just drop 130 units and everything would be fine. But we fired at least the bottom 10 owners, even if they had multiple units as an owner. So yeah, totally. Because the truth is the bottom 10% of your portfolio is most likely taking up 20 to 30% of your time. And you're probably losing money on them versus your top quality clients that you want to spend more time with so you can cultivate more business with them, maybe go deeper, maybe more asset management relationship, help them buy more properties because they're actually the sort of client that you want to spend your time with and you want to develop.
Yeah, when you were thinking of the objective way of just applying the math to it, I was thinking, then I would add a brain damage multiplier to that number and say, who are the brain damaged people, and let's multiply how much time and how much expense we're spending on these people.
Not to mention they could potentially be the cost for running one of my property managers off, which is going to cost me more money to replace them and train
extra brain damage.
Yeah, extra brain damage. I'm interested, when people come to you and you start talking to them about their goals, like a lot of them, you said maybe half of them say, I don't know what my goals are, but you're talking to them. Do you find that, and you and I were talking about this at the mixer, that a lot of people are like, well, they have a door goal. Is that what you're seeing versus like a profitability goal? And why do you think that's probably not a good way to look at the business? Because I do think when everybody is meeting people at these conferences, they're like, how many doors do you manage? Or, it's kind of a badge of pride maybe for some reason. How should people really be looking at it?
Yeah, really, really good question, and really gets to the heart of a lot of the work that we do. So yes, if someone answers the question, what are your goals? I almost always get a door count number. And it's usually somewhere between 3x and 5x what they currently have, no matter how long they've been in business. you guys know, and I know how hard it is to organically grow doors in a property management company. It is a grind because it's not just the business development aspect, but growing net doors means low churn, like really low churn,
which is very hard.
Which is really hard. And it's usually the last thing people think to do when they want to grow. Oh, I need to grow. I'm going to hire 2 BDMs. I'm going to get them trained up. They're going to bring me in 50 doors a month. First of all, that's hard. Even if you can do it, if you're shedding, 30, 40 doors a month or whatever percentage of that, you're barely treading water. So yes, why do I think it happens? I gave this a lot of thought after that conversation, Spencer. I think the answer is because when you started, it was true. When you started your property management company, the most important thing for you to do was grow doors. And you got a positive feedback response and a positive feedback loop every time you grew a door, because you actually did make more money to grow a door. And you had to get to some door count, 25, 30, 50, to be able to pay yourself something to, at least eat up your operating expenses with that amount of revenue. So it was true for a while. And then it was true for another little while because you needed to hire somebody, at least an RTM or a global team member, to do the administrative work for you so that you could grow more doors. So for the first 2 years of your business, it was, and for those folks, it is the most important thing to do is grow doors. But then you never get out of that mindset. You get to 200, you get to 300, you get to 400, and you're like, all right, as long as I grow more doors, I'll get more scale. And all the books I've read say that if I scale, I'll make more money, I'll get more interest from acquirers, I'm going to lead kind of the life that I want. And you don't stop to think, well, what sort of doors am I adding to my portfolio? Do I have a profit model that those doors get into? And so you're kind of on this endless growth track. And you're right. As an industry, we put a lot of people, and I was part of this. Like I was partly the beneficiary of this when I took over at Sawyer. If you take over a 1,300 unit, locally owned, family business property management company, you get on stage because it's like, 1,300 doors. He must know something. When I started, I knew absolutely nothing. We went over that. I think by the time I finished, I knew what I was doing to some degree. But that is a bit of a badge of honor. And that because it's hard, it gets rewarded. But it all comes back to, all right, well, what do you want as an entrepreneur? Why did you start a business in the first place? Most people started a business not because it was the easiest way to make money. Man, if you are smart, if you're competent, if you're even like average intelligence, you can go work an average work ethic. You can go work at a big corporation and make a decent living. Entrepreneurship is not the best way to easily make money. So you started because you wanted something more. Maybe it was more money, but for most people, it's time and control. So you wanted time and control. Well, what is the worst way to get time and control? 800 doors and no profit. That is chaos.
Brad,
it's chaos. And,
Brad, I know you got out of this business, but you're preaching now.
Yeah, you're preaching. That's right.
For sure. That actually was some of the best stuff. So I appreciate that. I cut you off, but I was going to give you an amen because you were nailing it right there. Feel free to finish that thought.
Okay, I'll land that plane. But I do get fired up about this because it's hard to watch folks spend a decade of their life investing their time and energy, countless hours into building something that's not getting them closer to their dreams. It's not getting them closer to the time freedom that they want to spend time with their family or to get to go do the experiences they didn't get to do as a kid because they didn't come from any sort of means and they want to work their way out of it. And this is America and you get to do that if you put your nose to the grindstone. And all of that is true. But if you don't have the right mindset and the right understanding of how the business works and how you actually make money in this game, you're just going to play that game until you pass out, until you say, I call it quits. I'm calling Matthew and Spencer, just take this thing from me. Or you just close down and you say, it's not worth it to me anymore. And
who do we call? That's what I want to know. Like, who do we call?
Yeah. And who do you call? I don't even know how many doors you have. I know it's tens of thousands, but yeah, I mean, at some point you're just like, holy moly, this is a mess. But you guys have your ship pretty tight over there, and have a lot for the rest of us to learn from.
We've got a ship, all right.
You'd be surprised. I think you'd be surprised. You hit on the reason I was telling you were nailing it is, one of the things I think so interesting, and every time I get the opportunity to say this to property managers, it's not a competition between all of us to see who can manage the most doors. I think that, and listen, I was a victim of this. I cannot stand before everybody and say, "Oh, I never worried about how many the number," right? But what I realized, the more I grew the business is, the expectations have changed for me in terms of like what is expected of me in my day, what is expected of me in terms of my week and my brain power. And like, if you said, "Hey, Matthew, if you want to grow a property management business that you have time with your family, you have a lot of space to operate, like
a lot of freedom,
like what we did is not, or what we're doing is not what you want to do."
Yeah.
Because it doesn't ultimately equal freedom. It actually, the demands on me are way worse now than they were, years ago. Like I haven't been on a vacation in, years that I didn't work at least 3 or 4 hours on the vacation, like taking phone calls before a dinner. And because it's just, it never stops.
It doesn't stop.
Now, and I'm fine with that. Like I chose that. And if I had to go back, I would.
You're clear on your goals.
That's right. I know what I want, and I know what I want to do. And I always wanted this. And I also see it as a platform to do what Spencer and I are passionate about, which is to develop people. So I did sign up for it, so nobody needs to feel sorry for me. But if people look at me and think, "Oh, Matthew, spends just days in, remote locations, fishing and hunting or playing golf," like that's not my life. Like I don't play golf.
You're not Peter Lohman taking 30 days off.
No,
that's a totally different decision.
But
totally.
But if you want to do what we're doing, great, come do it. But just know what you should have realistic expectations about what all's involved when you do that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you put your finger on the most important thing there, which is that's what you want to do. You want to build something large. You want to achieve some scale. You want to do, frankly, from my view, what really hasn't been done before in our industry. And I think that's really admirable, but it comes with a cost. But most property management company entrepreneurs don't want that. That's not what they actually want when you sit them down and you say, "What do you want?" Well, I want to make a good living. I want to have freedom of time, flexibility. I want, like Peter, to be able to take a month off if I want to. And they don't realize that you can have that life. You can have that life at 200 doors. You can really have that life at 400, 500 doors. I mean, I spoke with a client yesterday, 500, I won't name him, 500 doors, 41% margin. He makes $700,000 a year. That's a freaking good life. Yeah. And he works 30 to 40 hours a week, only doing the activities in his business that he wants to. I think that's what most PMs are actually after.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, I mean, Brad, we could go on and we could keep talking.
Maybe
for
we should have a part 2 of this.
Yeah. I thought the same thing.
I don't even think we got into any of the questions that Brad prepared.
No, I don't think so.
Well, I got all these questions.
It was way better. We'll save the questions for a part 2.
Yeah, we can definitely do a part 2. We'll have you back on, Brad. This has been fantastic.
Cool,
Thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon. And so we'll be back next week with another episode of the Evernest Property Management Show.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.